Yesterday, we started a new sermon series called The Mothers of Jesus, where we're looking at the 5 women that are listed in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel. And so we began with Tamar, the mother of Perez, the wife of Judah, and looking at her rather sordid story from Genesis 38. What initially comes across as, what in the world is this doing in the Bible, is actually a beautiful story of grace. When you look at the story of Judah and Tamar, the first thing that becomes overwhelmingly clear is that you can't read the Bible the way that most people read the Bible, as an inspirational story with a moral example in which to follow, because there is none. Judah and Tamar and Onan and they're all a hot mess. And so there's really no one to emulate. It's truly a story of God's grace, and God's grace in the life of Tamar and Judah. The whole story hinges on an Old Testament practice called Levirate marriage. One of the most vulnerable people in all their societies would be a widow who had no children, that she would lack status and security because of her particular position. She couldn't just go get a job to provide for herself. The thing that gave her a place and status in society was not just getting married, but having children as well to care for her and to kind of make her a full member of the family. And so the practice of Levirate marriage is if a widow died without, or if a man died without giving his wife children, then his next brother was to marry her and give her children in the name of that dead brother. This protected and cared for these widows, while at the same time continuing on the legacy in the name of the older brother, which was a significant thing in their day. Well, Tamar has that happen twice. With he was wicked, and so God killed him. With Onan, he was wicked for a different reason, and so God killed him. And then Judah essentially has all the power here in this situation, and he refuses to give his third son to Tamar. Rather than owning up to his shortcomings as a father, he chooses to blame Tamar. And so there's this elaborate sexual entrapment that takes place, where Tamar tricks Judah and essentially becomes pregnant by her father-in-law. And as their law would state that she was guilty of adultery, when Judah hears this, he says, "Take and burn." But she produces essentially his driver's license, his staff, and his signet ring, and his cord, which says, "You're the father." And Judah comes to this point where he says, "She's more righteous than I am," or "I am far worse than she is at denying justice." And so the story actually cuts against the grain of a lot of things. It says that justice matters to God, and those who are weak and vulnerable and oppressed, that to live righteously is to care for them. And so it really confronts Judah, and Tamar is granted justice. On the other hand, Judah has a profound transformation that needs to take place in his life. He has left the covenant family. He's married a Canaanite. He has left the people of God. He has not passed on the faith to his children. And he has what essentially is a breakout or a breakthrough or a wake-up moment when he sees that Tamar is more righteous than he. As you trace the rest of the story, you see that Genesis 38 parallels Genesis 37 to 40, that the time frame of the story of Joseph and the time frame of Judah actually overlaps, so that in Genesis 42, when the family of Jacob is going down to Egypt to buy food from Joseph, we see that all of this has taken place kind of in the time frame that Joseph was going through his ordeal. But what we see in Judah in Genesis 42 and following is very different than what we see in Judah in Genesis 37 and 38. A profound transformation has occurred, a new birth almost, as it were, where Judah now becomes the one who, for the sake of his father, offers to substitute himself for his brother Benjamin to rescue him so that his father wouldn't die of grief. When all of these things are kind of moving around, we see that when it comes time to name essentially the child of promise, the one through whom God's promise to Abraham will be fulfilled, the one through whom the Messiah will ultimately come and make all things right and all things new, the traditional view would say that Reuben was in line for that because he was the oldest. The narrative portion of the story would say, absolutely, it's going to be Joseph. I mean, he's the hero of Genesis 37 to 50, isn't he? But what we see in the grace of God is that God chooses Judah. to be the child of promise. And as you look at the story and the unfolding of Genesis, Judah is the only one who encounters what we would see as biblical repentance, where he confesses and acknowledges his unrighteousness before the Lord, and he throws himself at his grace and mercy. Jesus becomes the Lion of the tribe of Judah, and Perez actually becomes the child of promise, the son born to Judah and Tamar. And so what we see here is a beautiful picture and story of God's grace. And what happens in Judah's life? Who does God use to bring him to this aha moment? Tamar, the first mother of Jesus. If you're interested in more, I invite you to listen back to the whole sermon.